Hello, hello. Hey, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Very good, very good. Slightly warm.
Really?
Yeah, surprisingly, the weather has been incredible for the last few weeks and around 31 or 32 today, I think it was.
Wow.
So with no AC, very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, there was this expectation for some reason that September will somehow change things, but it really didn't.
Yeah.
It's like this feeling you have, like when something, New Year or something, and you say, okay, next year it will be different, but then you wake up and it's exactly the same.
Surely it can't get any worse. Oh, hold on.
Yeah, it kind of can. So we have a great topic tonight. There was this paper that was published and widely circulated and commented on and reviewed and all that. And we're going to talk about it. It's about blockchain privacy, and it's co-authored by Vitalik Buterin. And did you see? Did you manage to go over it?
I had a look at it and had a quick, I would say, like a skim read, but I read it kind of carefully, but that didn't help with my understanding totally. And then I played around with like one of the implementations. I forget the name of the privacy pools or something.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that as well. Before we dive into this topic, there were a lot of things were happening during the week all over the place. In Beam, it was relatively quiet still. I think the August is not really over, so the release didn't happen yet. We hope to release it next week. The wallet, which is like already ready and tested. But there were things that probably are worth talking about, such as, for example, that the base blockchain stopped for like 30 minutes.
Oh, I haven't been paying a huge amount of attention because, as you know, I've been very busy. But I saw that. I saw people making fun of that, which I enjoyed.
Yeah. So that was one thing. Stake protocol was exploited for like 6,000 Ethereum.
Oh.
Yes. And so quite a few things happened. But I mean, I think we will start and we will talk about this paper because first of all, it's going to be there is quite a lot to unpack here, and I did invest most of today kind of digging into both the paper and also the things that around the paper. So I do have some observations and things that I have kind of researched for this space. So I did invest quite a lot of time. And and I think it's an important topic in general for two reasons. First of all, because many of the things that we're going to talk about, we've been talking about for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
So it might be new material for some people, but it's definitely not new for Beam because Beam has been in this privacy space for a long time. And let's say many of those things were discussed a long time ago and quite, in depth. But just like anything that Vitalik Buterin says, immediately gets a lot of publicity and articles like Vitalik proposed a new way to provide privacy on Ethereum and all that. And I will not pretend that I'm objective on the subject.
Yeah.
I have decided against pretending to be completely objective, even though I will try to present the information, in the most unbiased way. But there are some things that, like my first impression or the first word that came to my mind when I read the article, the paper, is that it's a little bit weird. Okay, and I will try to explain, like during this hour, why I think it's weird. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about? So first of all, the title of this paper, and it's a scientific paper, formatted in the scientific format, the one that indicates that it's scientific.
Yeah.
And it's called Blockchain Privacy and Regulatory Compliance Towards a Practical Equilibrium. Okay. So far so good. Now, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 co-authors in this paper. And the first one mentioned is Vitalik Buterin, and it's organized in alphabetical order of family names.
Okay, yeah.
So it's just a coincidence that his name is first, probably, but it is. The second author is Jacob Ilum, or Ilum, I think. Do you know who that is?
I don't. I only know BB and the final guy. I mean,
Okay, so we'll get to him in a second, which is interesting. But Jacob Ilum is the chief scientist of Chainalysis.
okay.
Yeah. Then we have Matthias Nadler and Fabian Schar, I think it's pronounced. And these two gentlemen are scientists from university somewhere in Europe.
Okay.
And they did several articles about decentralization, like papers and articles about decentralization. But I think one of the most, I would say, like prominent articles that they co-authored was about Tornado Cash.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's also referenced here in this article that they wrote in this paper. It's the number 1, and it was called "Tornado Cash and Blockchain Privacy: A Primer for Economists and Policymakers." Nonetheless, right? And the last co-author is Mr. Amin Soleimani, who you said you know, right? How do you know him?
I don't know him, but I know of him from. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure it's the guy that made Spank Chain back in the day, which was like I don't know, like cam girls on the blockchain kind of thing, and launched like a fairly large number of stuff.
Yeah, so that's exactly the person, and I somehow I missed the Spank Chain. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, he is also behind I don't know if it's a DAO or a website called Iran Unchained that can handle donations, I think, to Iran or something like that, and several other projects that are all mentioned in the Twitter page of his that I was looking at. And one of the things that you also see there right now is a website called privacypools.com. And if you go to this website, you will see that's actually the beginning of implementation of exactly the concepts that are described in this article.
Yeah.
So this group of people is a little bit weird already, right? So first of all, we have Vitalik Buterin, which is like, okay, the god of Ethereum. Then you have Chainalysis, which also makes sense. Then you have two scholars who are not exactly in the privacy space, but wrote this article about Tornado Cash. And then you have Amin Soleimani, who is implementing that, apparently, the things that are written in this article, but I'm not exactly sure how he relates to all the other co-authors, right? So it's kind of an interesting group. And the funny thing is that if you would remove, I think, Vitalik from there, it would make more.
Yeah.
Or if you would remove, I don't know, maybe a couple. So this group together makes a little bit kind of strange feeling of like, how did this project come together? But that's okay.
Yeah.
So what is this paper about? So this paper is about an idea, how to handle privacy in general, right? So it's a concept. It describes a concept first and foremost. And this concept is not necessarily directly connected to Ethereum. And I always had this feeling that Ethereum is the word that, Vitalik brings to this paper, basically.
Yeah.
Because many things or most things that are described in this paper are not specific to Ethereum in any way. They are even not exactly specific to smart contracts, actually, right? But smart contracts obviously help, but they are not necessary to implement many of the things that are described. And so this paper has, I think, 5 parts. The first one is called Introduction. Then we have something called Technical Background. After that, after the technical background, which is quite lengthy, we have practical considerations and use cases. And then we have further technical details. And then we have a discussion. So these are the 5 kind of chapters of this paper.
Nice.
Okay, so let's start talking about that because it gets quite funny right from the beginning. So the first sentence is public blockchains are transparent by design. Okay, so I mean, we all know that that's not necessarily the case. And it's especially interesting because right after that, in the continuation of the paper, there is this chapter called, in the technical background, called Blockchain Privacy Before ZK Starts. I'll talk about ZK Starts in a second, but it starts with this classical story of how Bitcoin was considered private because of the pseudonymous addresses, and then centralized exchanges came with KYCs, and it was suddenly possible to track identities of people and connect them to wallets. So it turns out it wasn't really private. Then obviously it talks about CoinJoin, which is like one of the classic ways of introducing people to privacy. And then it mentions Monero, which is nice, entering signature scheme. And then suddenly it starts talking about ZK Snarks as Zcash. So basically technical background, which is the chapter that comes right after the introduction, immediately focuses on ZK Snark. Yeah. So it has this interesting, I will quote a couple of sentences. They're talking about privacy, and then the next logical advancement in the quest for increased cryptographic privacy involves the introduction of general purpose zero knowledge proofs as used in blockchains like Zcash. Okay. And then it says something like, there was this sentence, I need to find it, something like that. Blockchains that take privacy seriously, like Zcash, and things like that. So it's clear that somebody from the authors, I don't exactly know who, but he is a Zcash fan or shill or whatever, because Zcash is mentioned quite a few times and in the context of like, and this is how Zcash does things, right? Yeah. So this is another kind of interesting point. Now, in general, there is this kind of jump, right? So if you do an introduction, you explain the concept of combining privacy and regulation, which is very interesting and important topic. And then you immediately jump into ZK Snark. And this is strange because, I mean, you are either describing the concept or you're describing the technology, but like ZK Snarks is definitely not the only technology that can implement the ideas that they're talking about. You have Lilantos, for example, which can also be used for their idea, which we'll talk about in a second. But somehow they just, start from ZK Snarks. Now, Tornado can use the ZK Snarks, but I mean, that's not the only technology that can be used. And also, there is absolutely no mention of any deficiencies of ZK Snarks. They are not talking about trusted setup, nothing like that. Yep. It's just like ZK Snarks all the way.
They've decided that's the be all and end all, and they're ignoring other options and the like cons that come with it. Excuse me.
Yeah. So this is okay, but I mean, it's a decent choice of technology. It's you can't say nothing, anything too bad about the Kickstarter, but it's kind of I would say premature to talk about the specific technology which you should choose, because if you are presenting a new concept for privacy, I mean, probably you shouldn't start with ZK Snarks, but that's fine. Okay, so after you get this primer on ZK Snarks and you get to the point, right? To the point of, wait a second, what are they trying to, what are they proposing here? So what are they proposing? So what they're proposing is the following idea, and they illustrate it with the following example. Let's say there are several honest people. They call them here, Alice, Bob, whatever, like some random 4 people. But there is also the 5th person, which is known to be a thief. So the funds that are used by this 5th person, they call them Eve, they are, tainted, they shouldn't be used, and they're basically kind of, funds that were stolen, right? So the idea is like that. When you are using the privacy pool, and it's a standard kind of, ZK Snarks, basically you can prove that you are spending something without revealing who you are or what exactly you're spending, but you can always prove that you're spending the amount that you have contributed into the pool, right? So that's how Zcash works. This is how ZK Snarks works in general. And when you're doing that, you can also choose your own anonymity set. So since you know that if the bad person, the thief, has contributed bad funds into the pool, you say, okay, I want to create my anonymity set and only choose people who are honest in it.
Okay. Yeah.
So what's happening at this point is that 2 things. First of all, if you can always prove that you only mix your funds with honest people, so these are like honest funds mixed with honest people for like honest privacy, but Eve, who is a bad person in their example, their funds are not mixed with the rest. They're kind of, set aside. And in fact, Eve has a problem because nobody wants to be in the anonymity set with them because they stole those funds, right?
Yeah.
So this is the example they use to illustrate the concept in its, I would say, the most simplistic form. Now, this process of creating this anonymity set. They call it an association set. And it's obvious that users cannot do it manually. It's not like you're going now to manually select everyone in your huge anonymity set. That's not going to work. So you need some kind of a system. You need some kind of automated algorithm or something that allows you to create these sets. Now, these sets are created in one of two forms. It's either a membership proof or exclusion proof. So basically, you can say either that you are a member of some group of honest people, or that you are not a member. You can prove that you are not a member of a group of bad people. You can do either of these two things in their system.
Okay.
Now, so what they're saying here in a quote, in practice, users will not be manually picking and choosing deposits to include in their association set. Rather, users will subscribe to intermediaries that we can call association set providers, or ASPs, which generate association sets that have certain properties.
Okay.
So what they're saying is, listen, you cannot choose your own association set. Obviously, it's not practical, but don't worry. There will be people out there, organizations maybe, or groups or whatever, that will create this association set for you. We will call them ASP, association set provider.
Yeah. So
are you hearing this? You're hearing this, right?
Yeah.
It starts like, okay.
Yes.
So what does it mean that you are an association set provider? It means that you're actually deciding who are the good people and who are the bad people.
Yeah. Which I feel like we've done this for many years.
Yeah, it sounds familiar in many ways, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you kind of abstract it from the miracle proofs and all that science, I mean, come on. Now, and then they provide some, they call it possible constructions for how ASPs might operate in practice. And they give several examples. And this is exactly, I mean, when I was reading that, I was like, okay, that's the part that Chainalysis wrote, right?
Okay.
Because these examples are, number one, act with delay, exclude bad act. Any deposits is automatically added to the association set after a fixed period of time, let's say 7 days, right? So basically, you deposit your funds, and then after 7 days, when they are sure everything is fine with your funds, they provide you anonymity.
Okay.
And allow you to withdraw withdraw your funds while anonymous.
Yeah. What happens if they decide you're not okay? You're bad.
But then you can only withdraw your funds in a transparent way. You will not get anonymity.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically like, okay, you deposit your funds and then you wait until, everything clears and nobody says, oh, wait a second, he stole my funds from me and he's actually a bad person for some period of time. They say 7 days, but I mean, it's just an example.
Yeah.
And then if you are considered fine, then you will get your anonymity and you can withdraw. Example number 2, certain amount per month per person. Like, for example, if you deposit $10 for your, chewing gum expenses, then it's fine. You'll get your anonymity immediately. But if we're talking about larger amounts, then obviously it will take more time for them to check where you got it. Okay. It's all explained here, like in very kind of clear terms. So, like, if anyone is reading this paper, I would suggest jump to this part, which is not technical, because the technical part is actually obscures the concept and also is a little bit irrelevant. Because, I mean, yes, this is one of the ways to implement it, but there are others. Or number 3, real interesting one. Certain amount per month per trusted community member. You hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're a trusted community member or member of a high trust community, okay, then you will get your anonymity quicker. And the fourth one, which is absolutely awesome, as usual, real-time AI-based scoring.
The old AI-based scoring.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah, awesome. I mean, so you deposit your funds into the pool, right? And then they say, oh, 1 second, our AI shows that you don't get to be anonymous. You're not the one. Your AI calculated social score is too low. Sorry, man, no anonymity for you.
Yeah. I wonder if your score goes down after your first rejection. Like if you apply for a credit card and get declined, then your credit score gets worse or whatever.
Of course it does. I have no doubt about that, right? Then they switch back to technical talk and talk about supporting arbitrary denominations, which is not very interesting. All kind of special cases, reproofing, a lot of technical talk, and more technical talk and more technical talk, sequential proofs. So like there is a lot of technical talk after that in this further technical details kind of part. And then finally they get to the discussion, which is also very interesting. So what are they talking about in discussion? Say, okay, there is this kind of three more. There are several sections in discussion. So the first section is called Societal Consensus and Association Set. I quote, if there is a perfect consensus on which funds are good and which are bad, in quotes, in the system will lead to simple separating equilibrium. All users with good assets have strong incentive and the ability to prove their membership in a good-only association set. Bad actors, on the other hand, will not be able to provide that proof. Okay? So, I mean, I would say, okay, yes, it's obvious. I mean, if you, can prove that you're a good person, then you're good. But if you can't prove that you're a good person or whatever, you probably are not good or something like that. So it's a little bit too idealistic, I would say, because have there ever been a perfect consensus on which funds are good?
No. Sure.
Yes. So this perfect consensus is already kind of suspicious. But then they say, don't worry. I mean, we understand that, it's not always the case that, there is a perfect consensus, so they continue. So in cases where there is no global consensus and conclusion of whether funds are perceived as good or bad depends on the societal perspective or the jurisdiction. So such could differ. So basically what it says, if you're living in a jurisdiction where your funds are good, but you're sending it to the jurisdiction where these funds are bad, then you have a problem.
Okay.
And then they explain how this can be somewhat resolved with all kinds of, I don't even know how to call it, kind of the smallest common denominator thing or something like that. I quote here, right? Because, I mean, you need to kind of, it's difficult to I would say, imagine how it is going to work, but that's what they're saying verbatim, right? If needed, one could issue a membership proof against the intersection of both association sets and thereby credibly demonstrate that the deposit corresponds to their withdrawal in line with the requirements of both jurisdictions. So basically what they're saying is that, let's say you have $1,000 and out in these $1,000, one jurisdiction says that only 100 are good and the other one is that only 50 are good. So you can basically send 50 from one jurisdiction to another.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, I always like when I hear those words like jurisdiction or consensus, I always imagine the differences between countries like, I don't know, like Russia and, I don't know, Switzerland, United States or Australia, like completely different places with completely different laws. Anyway, so then they continue to talk about all kinds of properties for these sets and about practical consideration and competition. And they say like how today the regulation actually is working using the transaction screening tools and all that. So there is all kinds of expansions and explanations about their idea. And then one of the words that you will notice that kind of repeats itself over and over through this paper is the word flexible. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to avoid kind of, building hard, boundaries of what exactly these pools will do or how they will be used. Because from the technological perspective, it's nothing new, right? It's exactly the same mixer. The difference is that there is somebody from the outside that decides who you can mix with and who you can't mix with. Yeah. And then they say things like, the general setup of privacy pools is very flexible. By creating specific association sets, the protocol can be customized to suit a very large variety of use cases. So here are two examples. A consortium of commercial banks could create an association set that only includes their customers' deposits. This guarantees that any withdrawal creating a proof against this set has undergone a KYC and AML procedure at one of the banks involved. So basically, when you come to your bank and you want to deposit your crypto, they will say, wait a second, let's check your crypto. Like, let's please provide us a proof that your crypto is part of that association set, that you only mixed with the people who are actually customers of our bank. And then you can deposit your funds while preserving your privacy. Otherwise, no. Now, by the way, what's the otherwise, right? What's the alternative? The alternative is that you have to open it, right? You have to create an open transaction and give up your privacy.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that they are trying to do is to kind of say, listen, what we are doing here, we're trying to minimize like how much privacy you give up. So they have this great table, absolutely amazing. Let me find it right here. No, I'm sorry, it's not in this article. It's second. We'll get to it in a moment. But basically, they're saying, listen, if you have a problem, let's say you cannot use your funds privacy, so your option is to do it publicly. You just open your transactions and then you use it publicly. And this is the way that it works.
Okay.
So one of the things that obviously this article references is the original article by the two authors. Let me open it right here because it's also very interesting and important. So Matthias Nadler and Fabian Schar, they have published earlier an article called Tornado Cash and the Blockchain Privacy, a primer for economists and policymakers.
Hi.
And this article, this specific paper that was just published, it is based on some of the assumptions and some of the conclusions that were made in that article about Tornado Cash. So in the Tornado Cash article, what they did this interesting analysis on different types of on-chain privacy, okay? So they have separated it into two categories, into backwards-looking privacy and forward-looking privacy, okay? Now, it's a little bit difficult to kind of understand exactly what they mean, but the point is that backward-looking privacy, when you provide the proof about it, it discloses everything you did up until that point.
Okay.
So let's say you had some transactions and then you come and you say, okay, now I provide the proof that everything I did until that point was fine. And from that point onward, you don't know anything about it. So like once our transaction is complete, I move along and I don't do anything. And the forward-looking privacy is exactly the opposite, right? So you basically say, it's very complicated. Let me quote it as they say. So it doesn't allow the forward-looking privacy, doesn't allow the observer to link a known transaction that occurred before the privacy enhancing event to future transactions that happen after the privacy enhancing event.
Okay. I'm not gonna lie, I don't quite follow.
Me either. It's like 10 times and it's very confusing. But let's look at the example. So if you're not using any mixing protocol at all, basically you don't have any privacy. So you don't have backward looking or forward looking, no privacy at all. Yeah. If you are using a privacy coin like Monero or Beam, you have both. But if you're using their idea with this partial disclosure, right? So you don't have backward looking privacy. So basically, every time you use this partial disclosure, you disclose everything you have done so far. Yeah. But you have forward looking privacy, which means that whoever you have disclosed this to doesn't know what you're doing next.
Okay.
Now, it sounds better than no privacy at all at first glance. But then I'm thinking, wait a second. So if every time you are requested, you are proving what you have done before and disclose it. Yeah. And it happens all the time, then this forward-looking privacy is not really useful to you, right? Because
no, as soon as you do it, as soon as you use it more than once, you're gonna have to tell everyone about the stuff prior to the first time as well, which kind of
yeah, exactly. So it's very similar to obviously very similar how the system works today in many aspects. Yeah. Okay. So this is kind of the overview of the idea. Now, few questions that I have. So first of all, it's not new in the sense that when we were talking about auditability back, 5 years ago, right? Yep. And we try to understand how this works and what is needed from the protocol to be auditable, to be compliant, and we did the analysis on that. We have immediately reached this observation that yes, you can very easily prove everything that you have done yourself, because obviously it's your wallet, you have signed all the transactions, you have all of the data, and you can always easily provide proofs for the data. However, the problem is not with what you have done, the problem is always with the source of funds. Because right now, the way it works is that every bank is responsible for the funds that go into that bank, and they are required by law to ensure a lot of checks and those things that they have to make sure where those funds came from. And now, when you transfer from one bank to another, it works like a closed system, right? So if there is no new money going in, then everything is regulated and compliant. And when there is no new money going into one of the banks, it's the responsibility of that bank to make sure that these funds are okay. Which is why all banks are very careful when they get transfers from other banks that they don't necessarily trust, or obviously you cannot walk into a bank with a bag of cash, even if you have just withdrawn this cash from another bank across the street. It's a problem, right? They will not accept it. Yeah. And this is why there are all of these restrictions on using cash in general, because that's how the system maintains its compliance. And one of the problems with blockchain in this regard is that you have a lot of peer-to-peer transactions. Mm-hmm. And when you're using like DeFi protocols, like everything like mixes, and then when you come to the bank, you cannot easily prove the source of funds. And even if it's a completely open blockchain like Ethereum or Bitcoin, it requires some work to establish the transaction graph. Not to mention if it is a privacy blockchain where it's not possible at all. Yeah. And one of the conclusions that we reached back then is that the only way this can realistically work is that if you have this protocol where each transaction that you want eventually to be auditable should go through this third party, right? Basically, exactly the same idea. You need to have your bank involved somehow in your peer-to-peer transaction, to audit it.
Some proof of authority. I mean, that's what I kept thinking of when we were talking about it. It's very like, it seems very permissioned and like some kind of strange, like a blockchain could work in the same fashion where there's a group of people that are saying, okay, this transaction's all good and that kind of thing, but it kind of defeats the whole purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it basically falls to the same idea, and there is no other way to implement it under the current definitions of compliance. So this is exactly where it all stands, because what's happening right now is that there is a working banking system. Working in practical sense, it works. You can criticize it. You can, there are pros and cons, but this is how things work right now. Yeah. And now you have a completely new technology, which is blockchain. And the question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to use exactly the same regulatory framework and compliance frameworks to govern the blockchain transactions as well? Or do you need new one? So let's look at these two options separately. Let's start with assuming that we are going to continue exactly like it is today, right? You have KYC, you have AML, all the things are exactly as they are right now. So under this framework, there is absolutely no problem with implementing both privacy and compliance, and we've been saying that for a very long time. And back in the day, obviously it was 5 years ago, the main problem was not that it wasn't technologically impossible to combine privacy and compliance. It was because there was absolutely no regulatory or other bodies that could have participated in the process. So if I would say, I'm building a system that allows you to verify each transaction exactly like it would work with the bank, there were absolutely no organizations willing or being able to do that. Yeah. But if you have such organizations, so what you need is one identity provider for your KYC to include your identity proof in the transaction. You can obviously include any documentation in the transaction. It's been that way in Beam since forever and most other blockchains as well. So you can provide all of this information in encrypted form that can be verified using these same zero knowledge proofs or like other technologies by the auditing organization during the transaction. So there is absolutely no technical problem in building that, right? Beam can do it easily today. And you don't give up your privacy, for any other transactions, because like, once again, on Ethereum, on Zcash, most of the transactions are completely public, right? Even though if you implement this system, the fact that you have public transactions weakens the overall privacy. So it's not a technological issue. It never was. It's more of a political, regulatory, or whatever, right? So there is absolutely no technological problem with making this work. And it's important to understand, because some people think that, oh, wait a second, compliance and privacy, they don't combine. Like here, there is an article saying like how we can achieve a practical equilibrium. And the answer is very easily if there was a will to achieve.
Yeah.
So all of these constructions with, sets of kind of, selective anonymity sets where you mix only with good people, but not with bad people, it's all great. But the problem is not with this technology. The problem is that eventually you will still have to have these organizations or, things or governments or whatever who decide who are the good people and the bad people. And then we're back to where we start. Not to mention the ideas of having like a bank basically accept only funds that were, brought from another bank they trust, which is exactly like it is today. So if we take this with current framework for compliance, it's not very innovative. It's very difficult to implement, not technically, but rather like politically. And it doesn't really provide any additional privacy, I would say, over that what we have right now in the banking system, which is considered private because, bank employees sign this NDA or whatever, that they will not disclose information about the customers. And that's exactly the same level. So all of these decentralization, don't trust, verify, all of these concepts are kind of out of the picture.
Yeah.
And then you can really ask, why do we even need a blockchain for that?
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah, we have a good question that I want to bring up now.
Sure.
From Galaxia_MK. Is the space about the article because many people thought it was a good idea? Because it sounds clearly like a dumb article. Why is it important? Why is it so important? It's because Vitalik Buterin was involved, isn't it? I added all the emphasis.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that in many senses I'm preaching to the choir here, or whatever however the expression goes, because obviously people in our community don't, they understand what's the difference between this privacy and the privacy that Beam provides. But I think it's important to talk about it because, first of all, two things. First of all, it's going to be talked about. And at least maybe for some of you, I have saved, reading the article, and which is also, I think, a good service. But the point is that all of these things they have impact on how people are talking about it, thinking about it, like what's considered a good implementation of privacy and what's not, right? So, I mean, yes, the fact that if Vitalik Buterin was not in this paper, probably it would have been much less talked about, much less publicized, and there's a good chance that we would have not even read it. But since this concept, and somehow it came to our agenda, I think it's important to talk about it. But also because there are some, like, eventually, like, let's take a look at this from the other side, right? If we take the perspective of being completely, we don't care, Monero doesn't care, Beam doesn't care, everything is private, not listed on exchanges, nobody cares. So yes, that's fine. It's a great approach. But if we're trying to analyze this from a more practical perspective of, okay, so let's say we wanted to make it work with more of kind of real world compliance in some way, what would it take? What would be required? And by the way, let me give you an example why this is like relevant, right? For example, Tornado Cash, and they actually say it here in the article, that Tornado Cash provides a compliance feature, and I'm quoting here, that allows the user to create a proof of which deposit a given withdrawal comes from, right? While this mechanism does allow people to prove their innocence, it comes at the cost of having to trust a centralized intermediary and creates information asymmetries, right? So what they're saying, and they're quoting their own article here, They say, listen, Tornado Cash did have a mechanism that allowed any user to say, wait a second, my funds are completely clean because here is the proof of what exactly was mixed there, right?
Yeah.
But that was not good enough because they're in jail and the entire protocol is in the opacity, right?
Yeah.
And then we say, wait a second, but what is good enough? And this is one of the questions that this article is trying to answer. And it says, no, that's not good enough for you to be able to provide this proof. Somebody else needs to be able to do that for you. Because, I mean, the logic that my logic says it should be enough. Somebody comes to you and says, listen, what is that, where did those funds come from? Oh, they were mixed. Maybe they were mixed with money from bad people. And then you say, no, I can prove that it's not. That should be good enough, or in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's not.
No. And I like, I'm sorry to read out again, Galaxy messages that are coming through on Telegram. They mentioned that the banks are just afraid of being left behind and when it comes to crypto and trying to convince us that they're needed. And I feel like this is kind of, it's a very good point. Like the whole article kind of, to me at least, feels like we're trying to take away any goodness that comes from like blockchain in general, but especially privacy and blockchains, to try and conform to this old world ideas and this kind of stuff that is the whole reason that like crypto is here. I mean, if you look at like the outside of crypto stuff, you can have great privacy. You can have great privacy if you're a certain person or if you have enough money and this kind of stuff. Otherwise, you get less privacy and this kind of thing. But in crypto, it should be anyone and everyone has access to privacy, which luckily it's there if you go to the right places. But this whole paper feels like it's very kind of like credit scores I mentioned before, and like social credit scores and permission, and it feels very awkward even reading it, to be honest.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, I agree. But the way I see it, it's a process. So there is this concept of the Overton window, right? That kind of indicates what is the norm. What is the norm in society today in respect for money, right? What is money? How it is treated? How it is handled, and all these things. And the crypto, the blockchain industry has created a lot of new concepts and mechanisms, both technical and social, that the society and the banks and all the regulator system and the government were not ready at all. It was very surprising for them because, okay, so there was this Bitcoin for the first years, it was absolutely nothing, and then suddenly it exploded, and then suddenly millions of people around the world are participating in this new thing, which is like, what is it? Is it a new economy? Is it a new world order? Like, we don't even understand what it is.
Yeah.
And it's completely different from everything they need. So obviously there are two conflicting things that are happening at the same time. And I will give specific examples. So obviously, yes, we all see very well the rejection, the attempts to hinder any progress or any change, and banks fighting for things to remain exactly, how they were for ages, yes. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we see the same banks, obviously, doing something completely different. They're trying to adopt some parts of those technologies and say, wait a second, maybe there is something in this for us. Oh, look, it makes international transactions much faster. It makes things easier and make different domains, which is why JP Morgan Chase, which is like one of the largest banks in the world, they invest tons of money into building internal blockchain technologies. So yes, they're not trading on public blockchains just yet, but they are using internal private blockchains because they have found that, it's easier to integrate other organizations that are willing to trade these new tokenized securities that we provide, right? Suddenly, like there are all kinds of benefits. And these two things happen at the same time. I think one of the most recent news is that Visa is launching stablecoin on Solana or something like that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
did you hear about it?
No, I didn't. I saw the PayPal one, but I didn't see Visa.
Yeah, so there was this kind of interesting piece of news about, I think it was Visa launching on Solana or something like that. And you would say, like, wait a second, like, was it even imaginable a few years ago? I mean, it is happening. PayPal is launching a stable coin. You have gold on chain. You have all kinds of organizations starting to move on chain. Obviously, not everyone at once. And obviously not, immediately. But these two processes are happening at the same time. So there is the rejection and trying to keep the things as they are, and also the will and interest in innovation. And I think these articles, especially when they are co-authored by, let's do it like this, leaders of the industry in some way, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
We can say anything we want about anyone, but like Chainalysis is a well-known company in the regulation and compliance field, and this is their chief scientist with the founder of Ethereum and a couple of scholars
and the Spank Chain guy.
It's so weird. Anyway, so they write this article which is trying to create this equilibrium between compliance and privacy. So yes, I think a lot of people are going to read it.
Yeah,
in many different, I would say, like organizations, governmental and otherwise. And yeah, I think the concepts that are, and especially it comes and it builds on top of the Tornado Cash story, which is also interesting because, Tornado Cash, they say that it's like one of the most well-known privacy protocols. But I mean, there are many that were at least as well-known, if not more, before the arrest and before the adding the protocol to the sanctions list for the first time in history, right?
Yeah.
So this created a lot of waves that right now are being discussed in many different areas. And I think this article is trying to build on top of that and say, okay, so Tornado Cash provided privacy in some way, but it was not good enough. It was not compliant enough. It didn't work well with the compliance. So let's see how we improve on that, right? So this is, I think, what was one of the goals, because eventually, and I honestly believe that Vitalik Buterin does want privacy on Ethereum. Yeah, and understands the importance of privacy. However, it's muddy waters. You need to be very careful. You need to understand, because we just saw an example where there was suddenly too much privacy.
Sure.
So yeah, that's I think the point.
And I mean, and like people being persecuted for using something like Tornado Cash, and obviously not ideal. And I do think like Vitalik does want privacy on Ethereum, but also doesn't want people to be persecuted for using it. So it kind of makes sense in that regard.
Yes, I absolutely agree, because right now Ethereum is in a great position. It's a leading blockchain for many, many different applications. You probably heard this. Did you hear the story that he sold his Maker token?
Oh, I didn't follow it super closely, but I saw he sold some, and many of the like VCs, whoever they were.
So the story that I heard, it was that he sold his Maker tokens after MakerDAO announced that they're going to build their own chain based on Solana technology.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know if it's true or not, but at least that's how it was presented in the press. That like they made this decision and they sold his Maker tokens. Like, I don't know if this was even related, but I mean, I definitely understand his interest in making Ethereum, and I mean it in a completely like good way, right? Making Ethereum better and keeping it in front as a chain that to be used for DeFi and for like really great applications that exist on it. Maker, by the way, being one of the, I think, greatest examples of an amazing concept of over collateralized stablecoins. That's great project. So yeah, and having privacy is obviously becoming more and more discussed in many different contexts. And now that large organizations are joining these processes, they also say, okay, 1 second, but for our users, we would like to have this and that. And yeah, I mean, it's a completely understandable effort to figure this out, right? Now, the good thing in this article, yes, we have criticized a lot of concepts here as being, first of all, not very practical, not very new, and not very useful for the real world privacy, differentiating the blockchain from what we have right now in the bank, because, I mean, yeah, the banks, we know how the banks work. But the good thing is that this topic of privacy is being discussed, and it's being discussed by not just us, right? I mean, yes, in many situations, we all know that, and we all understand that, but we are still a very much minority, and a niche of people who understand privacy. We understand how it works, we understand how to build it and how to use it. Now, when we have most people in the world that don't even realize that they need it in the first place, I think any article of this caliber that talks about this is good, because it raises awareness. It widens the group of people that are involved in these discussions. So yeah, I totally agree that at least in this regard, it's important to have these articles and to talk about it.
Absolutely. I think it's great. Even if the protocol and that kind of thing brought up is not the greatest, it's great to have people such as the authors discussing it and bringing more attention to it and the wider crypto community outside of those that are in the know of privacy and this kind of stuff.
But by the way, one thing that I wanted to say, I mean, yes, I did not a lot of things here, but I think I did make an effort to analyze it on its merits of how they wanted it to work, what's the mechanism here. And I would really like, if anyone sees any other in-depth analysis of this article, please send it to us via Twitter or mentions or Telegram or whatever, because so far, and I was looking for criticisms or kind of in-depth reviews, I didn't find too many. What I found was two things. I found a lot of news articles, quote unquote news articles, like Alex brings us the new hope. Yeah. And I also found a lot of especially Twitter comments like, oh, Vitalik and the Chainalysis are doing privacy on Ethereum, how good can it be, right? So yeah, I mean, I agree, but still, it would be nice to see more kind of in-depth analysis, especially of this mechanism, and especially in the context that is being used. I think it will, it's always good to look deeper into those things, and there are a lot of hidden interesting aspects.
For sure. Alex, before we wrap up, we have questions that we shall go through. Let me find them.
Yeah, I have it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so I have 3 questions here. The second one is about SBBS issue. So first of all, yes, we will invite Vladi regardless to the next space. Max actually wanted to invite him to this space, but I really wanted to talk about this article. I'm sorry. So we will do it next time, I promise. But it was fixed, and it's waiting for the release, which is being delayed for absolutely non-technical reasons. So I don't know, basically being lazy, but I mean, not just, but there are a lot of laziness in that as well. We need to release it. I hope to do it next week. But it's completed there. We will start with .NET, I think, as soon as possible. Then we can see if it works exactly as we discussed. So that's the easy question. The first question, which is more difficult, is about dev fee, which is ending soon, and we still have almost no documentation and what's going on. So first of all, we do have quite a lot of documentation. I mean, it might be not perfect, but we do have it. It's in GitHub right now. You can contribute to it. You can do pull, like, forks and pull requests and improve it. And even just open issues of saying, wait a second, this is not explained well, or maybe expand on that. It will help, right? Because there is a lot of documentation on many topics. Not on all of them, but most of them are there. Regarding the Dev C ending, yes, it's ending in January. There will be no treasury. But having said that, at current beam prices, with the funds that we have, they're not very large, and we use them very wisely. And I mean, yes, it's a problem, not an easy to solve one, unfortunately. We will continue developing, and we'll continue supporting the protocol with everything we have. Most people that contribute today are not doing it in any, paid wave form or whatever, not even bounties. So yeah, that will continue. But other than that, yes, I mean, it's a fact that it's ending. And the third one, could the team make an ethical marketing proposal that either uses the treasury or crowdfund to fund a marketing tactic? What does ethical marketing mean in this context?
I was not sure, actually.
So something like an article or on a popular website, a listing. So first of all, we do that from time to time. For example, the article that was published on Hacker Noon was promoted. But we first of all of the funds, we need to talk to Amir to understand exactly when it's happening also, but all of the funds are going to be moved to the DAO vault, and de facto they're already managed by the DAO. So definitely there can be a proposal to allocate any amount of beam to, promotions of any kind, and it can be voted upon on chain, and then we can decide to do it. So that's definitely a possibility to do that.
Yeah, and I wanna say it doesn't need to come from the team. As we're transitioning to the DAO, these proposals can come from anyone, obviously, and even before all of the funds are transferred and that kind of thing, I'd definitely encourage anyone with any proposals to put the proposal forth on the forum or even in the Telegram chat and this kind of stuff, and see what people think and get some feedback and that kind of thing. And I mean, personally, I would happily contribute some beam to proposals that I thought would be beneficial for the beam ecosystem, and I'm sure
absolutely well. Absolutely. Having said that, it's important also to have realistic expectations from these promotions because of two reasons. First of all, bear market, and the overall attention is very, very low. And the second is that in order to create a sufficient amount of noise and attention in this climate, it's really a lot of money. So it requires a lot of funding to make something that will, unless you are Vitalik Buterin writing about blockchain privacy, it's not simple. So yeah, I mean, if we do have aligned expectations of what the impact is going to be, it's definitely a possibility to allocate funds and do marketing.
Absolutely.
Great. I feel that we've, it's been a good space, and we've discussed interesting topics.
Yeah.
And so we will reconvene next week at the usual time. Please send us interesting things that are happening and you want to talk about, except for the beam updates, obviously. And we'll see you next week.
Absolutely, Alex. It's been a pleasure. And see you next week. And thank you all the questions from Galaxia, Max and Flaxel for putting them together, and everyone for joining.
Absolutely.
See you soon.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.